Hi, everyone, and welcome so much to the She Heals the World talk show. My name is Izzy, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Natalie Dattilo-Ryan. So, Dr. Natalie is a clinical psychologist and instructor at Harvard Medical School, and she is on a mission to help people understand themselves better in order to take care of themselves better. She is incredibly successful. She has been featured as an expert in major publications like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Forbes, and also been featured on Good Morning America, Good Day LA, and CBS News. So she's everywhere. But she also has recently started private practice, offering one-to-one therapy, couples therapy, small group CBT courses for managing mood symptoms of menopause, and a lifestyle optimization program called Escape for women in midlife who want to reclaim their passion and purpose. So I'm really, really excited to talk to Dr. Natalie about her journey. But to be honest, the best person to talk about it is yourself. So thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us a bit about your career so far?
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here, Izzy. And it's so funny. All of those things that you read are true, but when I hear them, I'm like it doesn't quite connect unless that you're talking about me. So so I don't know. That's just something that's coming up for me as you asked me this question to talk about my career. And I guess I started my career close to not quite 20 years ago, but coming up on 20 years as a professional psychologist. And I
Yeah.
started as a junior faculty member at Indiana University in the School of Medicine in Indianapolis, Indiana, and was there for 9, 10 years. I left in 2016. I went part-time so that I could start my own practice, like on the side, sort of dipped my toe in this world of, I don't know, entrepreneurship, business ownership, but wasn't quite ready to take the full leap. And then life happened, and my family ended up relocating to the East Coast. And when we did that, I took a job at Brigham and Women's Hospital as the director of psychology in their department of psychiatry, and did that for a couple of years, kind of weathered the pandemic, leading a small team of psychologists through that experience. And then on the other side of that, I decided I was really, really ready to make a pivot, as we say, and went back into part-time private practice, and then eventually just took the complete leap of faith into solopreneurship last year. Not even been a full year at this point. So I'm still, like, I don't know, in transition. I'm still learning the ropes. I feel like it was a long time coming, but was always the goal. It was always what I had in the back of my mind as to how I would be spending my professional time. So that's kind of how we got here.
Well, congratulations on
Thank you. It's terrifying.
yeah, diving in the deep end.
Yes.
And I think we're really lucky to have you because obviously you're a psychologist. And so for our viewers, we were chatting before this call about that journey of obviously you're so well established and an expert in your field in your industry, but it took you sort of a while to, jump in and make what would seem quite that natural progression. And the great news about
Mm-hmm.
you is that you understand the psychology of making that transition and how it all
Yes.
pieces together.
What I don't know about running a business, I make up for in my knowledge of psychology. So, hopefully it'll all come out in the end. But yeah, I've always actually had an interest in business or business systems, namely like healthcare systems and the systems that are in place that allow us to thrive, either as professional people in a particular industry, or just people in general trying to like make a living and stay healthy. And so way back in the day when I was in graduate school, I actually pursued a master's degree in business, which is a specialized degree in health administration, healthcare policy, and research. And so there's a part of me that's always been very interested in the idea of running a business and scaling a business. But my first love is psychology and working with people and working one-on-one with people. And I had done that for so long in institutional and academic settings. So I was always part of a large system and always just very curious about all the decisions that were being made at the top, and then being implemented. It influenced how I was able to practice my craft with people or with groups. And even in the courses I taught. So I taught therapists, psychiatry residents, and junior therapists how to do this work
Mm.
for years. And that's one of the things that I really love is teaching, in addition to providing clinical care. So all that's to say, like I don't know, it surprises me that it took this long. But life also happens, and family matters, and life transitions have really not got in the way, but they needed to be my first focus.
Yeah.
It finally came to a point in time where I was like, okay, I'm ready. But what I found about that was that it was both scary and not scary at the same time. And I don't know if that, sort of resonates with people. Like, we talk about it being a risk, and I'm a pretty risk averse person. I wish I wasn't, but I am. And but it really didn't feel that risky, but it still felt scary. And the reason why I thought about this, I'm like, why have I hesitated for so long to do this? And I'm hoping that people who are listening to this will relate, which is, I didn't realize there was grieving. I didn't realize that there was a process of grieving involved in it, because how I had practiced my profession for almost 2 decades at this point was a big part of my identity.
Mm.
And changing roles and stepping into this other role as business owner and private practice owner and entrepreneur was just foreign.
Mm.
And I felt like I was going to be giving something up by doing that. And I just really wasn't prepared for some of the sadness that I felt in that process, in addition to the excitement and the looking forward. Like, that's a huge part of it, but I wasn't prepared and still had to go through a process that was like kind of like grieving.
Yeah.
You
It's so
know,
interesting because actually that's the part that doesn't get touched on. Like it is all about change and transformation, but what are you leaving behind? And that
right.
identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I had built my identity around someone who worked in a particular setting, and somebody who worked with groups of people, and somebody who was always, I was attending meetings, I was involved in planning, I was involved in programming. That was all. And, the reason I was able to do so much of that was because of I had identified as the type of psychologist who practiced in those settings. And I didn't have to think about some of the other things. um, I was curious about some of the other things, but I didn't have to know how to do them. And then, which was fine. I mean, that was part of the exciting piece, which was I wanted to have more control over how I spent my time, how I spent my days, how I ran my practice, how I was able to work with my patients and my clients and my students. And the flexibility that comes from being able to basically run your own business is like, there's nothing like it. There's
Yeah.
nothing like it. And I knew that I was at a place where I was really hungry for that, and it was really necessary in order to support my family in the way that needed to be done. I wasn't prepared for the barrier that had kind of held me back for so long, was that who am I going to be without all of these things that I've always known?
So was it afterwards that you realized there was the grieving and that was sort of, or was it before? Like, how did you?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
In before, it was really just sort of the mental preparation and thinking about, and the actual preparation, never really feeling like you're fully prepared enough, right? That's why it's
Yeah.
sort of taking the leap, taking kind of launching with, and kind of taking a leap of faith, sort of like, let's just see what happens kind of mindset that sort of become my motto. But um, I didn't realize until after, looking back, that I was also anticipating just the change. And change, I don't know for others, but for me is a challenge.
Mm.
It can be challenging, um, even good change, positive change, welcome change, like change that you worked hard for, can still come with a tiny sense of loss.
Mm.
So hopefully there are others that might connect with that and maybe recognize that in the process leading up. Like if you're on the fence and you're thinking, I really want to do this, but something's holding me back. And
Yeah.
so this actually is one of the processes that we use for therapeutic change. So in my practice, we talk about stages of change. This is very relevant to psychology and in business planning, that we will spend a great number of years even in a particular stage of change called contemplation.
Mhm.
I don't need to get into all
Oh, I
the
love
details around that, but
it.
contemplation, this stage
Yeah.
of change, is sort of like back and forth. You're back and forth. You're like, you realize that a change either needs to be made or you'd like for a change to be made, but it's going to come at a cost. And it's really weighing out the cost and the benefit of making that particular change. This is something that we use for behavior change, but it applies to life change
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
too. So you might, sometimes we spend years toiling in this stage of change, which is sometimes looks like information gathering, decision making, talking about it, thinking about it, making some slow progress towards just implementing the change. But there's also emotional aspects to that. And so when I'm working with my patients and my clients, we might be talking about some of those things. What are the barriers? What's getting in the way? This forms a type of technique that we use in CBT called motivational interview.
Mhm.
So it's a series of questions that's designed to extract this very information, which is like, what is stopping me? What would I be giving up? And am I really ready and willing to do that yet? Then we move into action stage, which is you're actually taking steps. You've decided you're doing it. It's also super scary. And then you just sort of maintain those changes, the actions that you're taking, the decision that you've made. You're kind of putting it into effect. You're making it happen. And sometimes it's just helpful to remember that just because you haven't made a decision or committed to something yet doesn't mean that you can't. It just means that you're maybe not quite ready,
Yeah.
but that there might also be something either very tangible, practical, or emotional holding you back. And
And it's that emotional aspect from your side. It was the identity loss, and yeah.
I think that was a big part of it. Looking back, like I said, I didn't know necessarily that that's what was getting in the way. I was putting it on these other things, financially, and the insecurities that I felt and the imposter syndrome that I had and all of that stuff, which is also still all emotional
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very emotional, you know? So yeah, that's part of my story.
So
Um,
I was just going to ask, as a psychologist, were you aware that you were in the contemplation stage and then the action stage, or was it sort of only reflecting?
yes, both. I I think I was, yeah, I'm trying to think back. Like, was I aware of it at the time? Yes, because I had sort of like made slow steps in this in a very safe and progressive kind of way. And I think that speaks more to like, I don't know, my own risk aversion and wanting to feel like I wanted to set myself up for success, but you can only do so much of that in advance. And so this is
Yeah.
where I was also relying on like mindset and the mindset tools and the tips and the tricks that we use, in therapy and coaching to help, lean in. Like, what does that really mean? Like, what is that? How do you really apply that in your real life? This is growth mindset. And I actually just posted about this a little bit because I was reminded of an interview that I gave years ago around creating, the attitude and the action that you need to take when you want to make sustainable change in your life. Okay. So, um, and like I lean on growth mindset for that, which is this idea that we invite hard things into our life. We lean into anything we do with the idea we're going to learn something. Like growth will happen either way. And what I told this journalist at the time was that if your only goal ever is to learn something, then you will never fail, no matter what happens.
Yeah,
Right. So
really
it's
good
that
point.
fear of failure that can, also this emotional barrier, which is like, what if I fall flat on my face? That will never happen if your goal is to learn. And I don't mean learn facts and knowledge, although you'll probably learn that too. I mean learning about yourself, learning about what you're capable of, what it really takes in this way and that way. And we become more informed decision makers and more informed business owners and more informed through the mistakes that we make. So we're either going to succeed or we're going to learn. And honestly, we'll probably end up doing both,
Yeah,
right? Like failure doesn't happen. It really
yeah,
doesn't,
cool.
or at least not in the way that we are, frightened of. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
As someone who loves learning, that feels so much
Mm-hmm.
more comfortable applying that to challenging situations. Actually, I'm going into this to learn than to
Yes.
achieve X, Y, Z, Actually, I really love that. I'm surprised I've not heard or thought about that before.
He called it the hack of all hacks. And I was like, yeah, because, which I love, because I've used this now in my life several times where I was on the, sort of it feels like the precipice of like, I don't know, a decision where you're like, I don't know how this is going to go. I feel like I'm prepared, but am I really prepared? Am I really the one that's qualified to do these things that I'm being asked to do? And I said, well, I'm going to learn something either way. I'm going to learn something. I don't know. I actually don't know how this is going to go. And of course, I'm going to go into it. I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to bring everything that I've got to give it. Like I feel like this is what I've been working for, but I still don't know how it's going to go until I do it.
Mm.
And then I think there's this process of iteration. So, okay, if I'm paying attention, I'm not just focused on the performance or the outcomes, because that's not gonna happen right away. What is gonna happen right away is this sort of checking and rechecking, like how's it going? How am I doing? What do I need? Um, and from a learning mindset, I want to learn about myself and I want to learn about this process and I want to learn what I'm capable of. And I may find out at the end of it that it's just not for me. Like, it's when it's all said and done, no matter how it goes, I end up learning that, like, I thought I was going to like that. It turns out I don't. Or I thought I was going to be like, I was going to kill it with this thing. And it turns out, but that's all good information for me to have. And it'll help me inform. It'll inform me for the next time around or the next decision, the next opportunity that comes along.
Absolutely. So, as you said, you just cannot fail because you've learned.
You cannot tell. It's great. Just gone. Not
Yeah,
even, not even a word.
yeah. So, are there, I mean, when you got to that point of making that transition and looking back and thinking around the grieving process, are there specific tools as psychologists that you then use for dealing with that side of it?
Couple of different tools come to mind. First of all, the mindset tools, which is really just sort of like the attitude and then the actions that you take that sort of back it up. And also realizing, if there's perfectionism in there, which I think for a lot of us, who are fairly ambitious and very achievement oriented, and growth focused, there can be a bit of perfectionism in there, or wanting for things to be a certain way, or having some standards, and that can also be a big barrier. It can be a barrier to getting started, and it can be a barrier to sort of pushing yourself, because we get stuck in the idea that it needs to be a certain way, and sometimes it's good enough. Sometimes it's just good enough as it is, and so that's also a mindset tool that I use for myself and with my clients. Is it's good enough for now.
Mhm.
Always keep refining and changing, but if you're waiting for it to be, you know, better than it is, you're going to be waiting a really long time. And so like just do it. Good enough for now. Just get it started. You can always refine as you go. It's
Yeah.
sort of an anti-perfectionism like way of thinking. As far as the grief, and grief's a very strong word to put in there. It's a little bit of grieving. It's a little bit of just recognizing that there's um maybe even sort of closing of one chapter and like starting another.
Yeah.
And I think just to acknowledge that it's a very mixed emotional bag, is probably the first thing to do. And to not be like, if I'm sad, it must mean I shouldn't do it. Or
Mm,
if I'm feeling like this is a loss, or I'm giving something up that's important to me, like that doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. It just means that I'm human and I feel all the feels,
yeah.
and that's part of the deal. That's part of the deal. I think it tells us what's important to us, and also sometimes it's just time to let
No.
it go. Like we've outgrown it. It's been going through my daughter's clothes, because it's that time of year and we're kind of going through, and I still always kind of hold on to the cute little clothes that they wore when they were little, and they're like, Mom, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, but it's so cute. So, but now they're teenagers. So it's almost. We're like, I have a tween and a teenager. So, it's probably time.
And that's so true around actually, yeah, being able to acknowledge that there might be emotions in there that you didn't expect. And that's not a bad thing. It's,
Mhm.
you said,
Yeah,
that's
not at
happening.
all.
Yeah.
Feelings are a form of communication. So, I also have to like walk the walk. And so putting into practice the things that I help others with is just recognizing that what you feel is really just, it's telling you something important. It's a form of communication. We want to listen. We want to speak the language of emotion, because it's very informative. And even the ones that don't feel great, even the ones that don't feel great, still important.
So I'm interested in your perspective as someone, you've admitted you're quite risk averse. And I'm sure actually, many of us are, but we do have that dream of being the entrepreneurs, as you said, all the benefits with the flexibility of your schedule, fitting around family. So could you give any advice for people that are having difficulties making that leap? I appreciate there's that idea of
Mm.
learning, but then are there specific things, information gathering that's better for like a risk averse type to be focusing on?
Mm-hmm. Um, Yeah, I think it comes down to the decisional balance that happens when you're weighing the costs and the benefits of doing just about anything. But this is a pretty big life change for a lot of people, I would assume. So it's the idea that it's more, where's your pain points? Is it going to be more painful to stay where you are, or more painful to make the change? And it's sort of like I don't know if it's like pick your heart. Like it's hard to stay and it's hard to leave,
Yeah.
but when the pain of staying outweighs the risk of leaving, as the case may be, and then you kind of know. There are ways that you can do this in a more objective fashion. Like you could do pros and cons, and you can weight them out, and we can go through that. And some people really like to do that because it becomes very clear and objective that the right thing to do here is X. But this kind of decision, I promise you, you can go through all of those iterations and you can add it up and you can quantify it. It will still be an emotional decision. At the end of the day, it will still be, this is what feels right for me.
Mm.
And that is pretty subjective. It's pretty squishy, but and the research will show that big life decisions are almost always made with the heart,
Mm.
you know, and the head. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, but when it comes right down to it, I mean, I think when maybe in the people that you talk to and women that you talk to, that like it just felt like it was time. It felt like the right thing to do. It felt like the next best move. It felt like a calling. Like those are all, that's
Yeah.
emotion. Yeah. And if you're a mission focused business and a mission driven person, like it's a great balance of both, but you need the emotion. Otherwise it doesn't work. It won't work. It
Yeah.
won't work. That's the why. That's the big why. So yeah.
And actually, I mean, that's completely what I love about She Heals the World, because it is supporting women who have that mission and they have their why, and
Mhm.
it's incredible to talk to these people, because as you said, it's that heart, the passion shines through, and it just seems to work when that's
I
part
I
of it.
think when you are aligned with what you do and what you bring to the world and what you have to offer, and being in service in that way is aligned with like who you are.
Mm.
Like, I mean, that's magic.
Yeah.
There's also a very practical aspect to like running a business and running profit and loss statements and making sure that like, okay, this business actually exists to do these things.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, like on those days where it's like, why am I doing this again? I have that like heart why. And so I commend all of the women out there, bringing them their full selves to the work and the service that they
Mm.
do. So
Yeah. So
beautiful,
tell us
beautiful.
about your mission, purpose, why. Tell us.
Hmm. Well, for the longest time, and this is still the case, it's evolved over time. My mission was I'm a clinical health psychologist dedicated to raising awareness and reducing the stigma attached to seeking mental health treatment. And so years ago, we didn't talk about, and it's not that long ago. I mean, in my early days, we still didn't talk a lot about mental health issues. It was very much very, it was stigmatizing. I do think that the pandemic and going through that, and all the emotional fallout from that did allow us to have more conversation about mental health issues, specifically things like anxiety and depression. So now we can talk about those things more openly, been more normalized, but seeking treatment for those things there's still a little bit of a taboo attached to the idea of like, you don't just have one of those things, you also have to have professional help or seek treatment for that. Right? It's not the normal kind that everybody has. It's the really bad kind that you have to have to get help. However, I just don't think we talk enough about what good mental health care is, what effective treatments are, what therapy really looks like behind closed doors. It's always been such a private and confidential kind of experience for good reason, but that has limited us and precluded us from being able to talk about what good therapy is.
Mm.
So that's really what I'm trying to put out into the world is through speaking to the media and public education and public outreach. I want to inform people about not just mental health issues and what they are, but when to seek treatment, when to seek help, when
Mhm.
to and what to expect in that process. So my goal is to create more informed consumers of the care so that we know if we're getting good therapy or
Yeah.
not.
So important. And yeah, you touched upon so many important issues there. Like, yeah, what is good therapy? What should people be looking for? Because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are therapists, and there's so
There are a lot of people who will, that are out there, and it's great, bless them. We need all of the people that feel called to help other people. Um, but we also, as consumers and seekers of that help, probably need to vet a little bit more and know what to expect because it isn't the case that any therapy is better than no therapy. It is, not all therapy is created equal. Not all therapists are created equal. So it does a huge disservice to the field if we are not also monitoring our own to make sure that the care that's being delivered is the right care for the right.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it is one of those things where, so I'm a naturopath, and
Mm-hmm.
someone says, "Oh, I've seen XYZ, it doesn't work," and then they then think they're unhelpable, untreatable, etc. But it's
Yes.
always going to be down to that specific therapist, whether it's mental health or anything. Actually, it's really sad that
Yes.
people then lose that opportunity to find someone that could help.
Oh, Izzy, I hear that. I mean, I hear like you're in my head about this, which is people have had not great experiences, and then believe that it's because of them, that there's something wrong with them, or there's something broken in them, or it works for other people, but it doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
I would always want for people to come away with, as having a helpful or at least a positive encounter with a helper or a
Yeah.
healer. And knowing that, there's a goodness of fit factor, and it isn't always about, sometimes, you want to work with a good therapist, but really what I'm talking about is just good therapy.
Mm.
So, when we, seek a provider of any kind, sometimes we go to our doctor because we really, really like them. Like personally, they're just
Yeah.
really nice and pleasant, but really we want them to help us.
Yeah.
like that, I'm coming to you because I want whatever we're doing to work. I want to feel better. I want for this to be effective, like for me. And so you may be a great person, and we may get along really well, but that doesn't maybe at the end of the day really help me. So the goal is to be helpful.
Yeah.
And there are ways to do that, and there are ways to not do that. So
But as oh yeah, I really appreciate the work you're doing because actually, yeah, making sure people are aware that, well, as you said, when they can get help and that they can get help.
they can. It is harder than it should be. I'll admit, like there is an access issue here. So being able to get connected with some good therapy
Mm.
when you need it that you can afford. Like there's a whole bunch of factors there, but we have to start having the conversation. And in particular for women in midlife, which sort of I now am part of. Yay, made it. There is a lot of misinformation
Mm.
around care, especially mental health care for women in midlife and are going
Mm.
through like the menopause transition. There's a lot of conversation in the world about that now, which is great. But my goal is always to make sure that the information that's being disseminated in the small way that I can is accurate. So that's kind of the next frontier, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, so I noticed so you specialize in the sort of midlife women type, sorry, in
Yeah,
naturopathy.
the midlife, yes, midlife,
Yeah.
like men and women, like, but
Yeah.
women are getting, there's a lot of attention being paid now in ways that I think is great, around menopause. But there are, men have a midlife too. They go through, they go through it. They also, love the women that are going through it, and so everybody's going through it, whether you want to or not.
Yeah, yeah.
My specialty area is actually in the prevention of depression relapse. So for a long time, I've worked with people who are either prone or at risk to episodes of depression, especially because it tends to be recurrent. It tends to be a chronic condition that's prone to flare up. But what we get to do is work in preventative ways.
Mhm.
So during periods of quote remission, what can we be doing behaviorally and lifestyle wise to help prolong those periods of remission, and then hopefully, prevent
Yeah.
further flare-ups. So I get to both treat and prevent, in particular depression, but also anxiety and all the things that also come with it. So mood issues in midlife are not very well understood, but are highly prevalent.
Mm.
And in particular, mood swings, depression. A lot of women complain about anxiety, but I think a lot of the time what we're talking about is something that looks a little bit more like depression. We're just not calling it that.
Mm.
And so knowing what we know about, because we've got great tools and decades of research about how to prevent depression from a behavioral standpoint, there's no reason that we can't put those things into effect. Like for all of us, if it's quite likely that your mood is going to be affected in this phase of life, like predictive, not for everybody, but for a large chunk of people, in the same way that you might anticipate a prenatal or perinatal mood shift. Hormones, right? They're in the mix. And this is a predictable time of life in which they're going to be affecting us in a way that we don't fully understand, but we have enough, we know enough to know that there are things that we can be doing lifestyle and behavior wise, in addition to any other medication treatment or hormone treatment, and there's no need to suffer. Like that's sort of like the bottom line, I think, message for me, for everybody, is that it doesn't have to be miserable. It can actually be
Yeah.
quite great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've
So
got
that's
that
a
sort
positive message for the world.
of So I'm really interested in actually the difference between working as a psychologist in sort of, for example, when you're working in a hospital to in a private practice. Like, have you had to check that, did you want to change the way you worked, or was it just, you take how you do it there and then you just do it privately? Like, how has that change been?
That's a great question. In some ways, it's exactly the same. In some ways, how I am in my meetings with my patients is almost exactly the same as it would have been anywhere else. How I practice is how I practice. How I apply my CBT methods is the same. And honestly, it's so much of it is by Zoom. Like honestly, it's just like this in my little box. Um, and so in that way, not much is all that different. It's all the other stuff. It's all the other sort of add-on um, obligations, and some of those can become quite burdensome. Some of them are redundant. This is sort of in terms of like documentation and audits and policies and procedures that need to be in place to protect the organization or the entity or the hospital or the provider group, if that's the case. Some of that still exists as an independent practitioner. Obviously, I still have to have malpractice. I got to maintain life insurance. So there's all those things, but it removes an added layer
Mm.
of, just sort of, I could have to take these compliance modules just because for the entity and for the organization, the enterprise that I work with, I don't need to do that. I have to keep up with my CEs, but a lot of the other added things just became very time consuming and took away from my ability to give my full energy and attention to
Yeah.
my patients and my
Yeah.
clients. So that's been the biggest. I do miss, and this is only because I'm in solo practice. I do miss feeling like connected to a community, my colleagues, the stimulating kinds of conversations that we would have in some of our meetings and in our consultations and things like that. So I do, if there's anybody out there doing this alone, like I know that there are communities and I would love to connect with others. Also, that takes more time, but it's different in mostly the administrative overhead and burden that comes from being affiliated with large institution versus just kind of the I can be more nimble. I can kind of try. I have the freedom to try different things in terms of how I price my services, how I work with individuals and couples is really also hard to do.
Yeah.
In other places, or even families, um, being able to schedule according to my schedule. So I can meet with people in the evenings, I can meet with people on the weekends, I can do all of those things and kind of fit it into a different type of scheduling grid. So that's I think the biggest difference.
And is
So,
and was it something that sort of is fairly easy to get clients, or have you had to navigate the world of marketing as well?
yes. Yes. Marketing. It's some people some therapists in private practice I know have had no issues whatsoever in maintaining like full caseloads and managing clients. And it often is because of relationships that they've built with people who would refer their patients or
Yeah.
clients to them.
Yeah.
And that's always, I think, always going to be the best way to go. I have no idea how the future looks in terms of like AI and like what, how that's going to influence and
Yeah.
change the landscape of just about everything.
Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation. But I still think relationships are important. So word of mouth referrals, you know, um, networking, meeting people and face to face and being like, here's what I do. Here's some information. Feel free to pass it along. Going out and giving talks and being, getting in a room full of people or on a Zoom and letting people see who you are and
Mm.
what you're about and what's your vibe and either, meeting potential clients that way or meeting potential referral sources that way. So I'm kind of old school. I'm kind of analog in that way, but I have dipped my toe in sort of the digital media and I like being on like Instagram for now, not so much because that's where I'm hoping to find my clients. It's just an outlet for me to put some of these ideas that I have about mental health and the research that's out there and what people are talking about. And it's kind of like my take on that stuff helps me kind of sort through it and bullet point it for myself too. So that's what I use it for.
Yeah, because it's really interesting sort of having these conversations with so many different types of people because some may be new setting up, but they're setting up in something they're new to as well. So it's sort of just getting that client base there, they're learning from their client base. Whereas with you, you are so well established, you know exactly how to
I,
do your trade. But it's, there's still this aspect of, bringing in the clients.
I think it is like if I was starting out and I hadn't built a sort of a practice model, I guess, for myself, I would probably still need to learn, like try
Yeah.
things and see how it goes. I know that, like, all right, I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to learn something either way. Like it either works, it doesn't work. And then I have more information to refine. Like, are these the clients I really like working with? Are these the client? Do I have a specialized set of skills in this particular area? They always talk. I think this was another, we're going to talk about me again. I always felt like I needed to have a very, I was always told you have to have a niche. Like this is
Yeah.
your niche. This is the thing that you do that sets you apart and is different from everybody else. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. And so, there's people out there who are like, I can help you with that. And I'm like, but there's so many things. Like, how am I supposed to narrow it down? So that was also part of the process. But I also realized along the way that identifying this one thing doesn't preclude you from doing the other things. It just gives you some credibility to build from. Like, this is what I know how to do. It also turns out that I know how to do some of these other things too. And you're almost lended some credibility because you know this one thing really well.
Mm.
Versus I know all of these things, but I'm kind of all over the place and it's not really clear what you know.
Yeah.
And I was doing it backwards the whole time. I was like doing it. Oops. I was like, oh, when that finally clicked, I'm like, oh, I see why they always say that.
So was there you were doing everything and it's sort of more recently that you're like, but by the way, I'm the specialist
This
in
is what I do.
mental
Like I'm gonna
health.
claim it. This is what
Yeah.
I do. This is what I do. This is what I like to do. It's sort of like that intersection of all of the things. Um, and at some point I was just like, I'm just gonna claim it. This is what it is.
Yeah.
And there was some grieving in that too. If I'm gonna be honest, there was like, am I giving up some of these other things that I also love and these other types, the people that I like to, work with and teach and it hasn't really felt like I've given those things up, but I
Mm.
was afraid that I would lose um, either opportunities or um, areas that were just very rewarding. I wasn't going to have those anymore if I decided that this was what I do, and it's like all I do. This is the only thing I do. I'm still refining that, though. I'll be honest. Like I still I get contacted from, you know, people from all walks of life who want to work with me, and that's great. I welcome all of it. I'm not gonna. I'm at the, yeah.
Yeah.
Hit me
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. That no, that's sort of testimony to the fact that yes, you've niched, but you're still being contacted by everyone. So
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, what I have out there is, I'm really, I like, I get it, I've been there. I've kind of, it's one of those, I work with a lot of men and women, but women in particular, who take care of everybody else.
Yeah.
Whether that's in their professional life, their personal life, both, all of the above. They are often in positions of taking care of other people and look great. Like they're doing it all.
Mm.
Like, seems like they've got it figured out.
Yeah.
But like on the inside, they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. And when is somebody just going to take care of me? What? And so I get that because that's my life. That's kind of, I don't know if it looks like I've got it all together, but I don't. But I'm trying. And sometimes I need help. Sometimes I need help too. Sometimes I need someone that's going to take care of me and like kind of just hold my hand through the process and tell me
Yeah.
it's going to be okay. And so I find that message resonates.
Mm.
Um, and and I also am very, I want to look at the emotional aspects, but I also want things to be very, very practical. I want the tools that we're talking about to be applicable, useful, like you can put them into effect like today. I know that they're going to work. Sometimes they just take, just got to give it a little time. You stick with the process. And I sort of have a method that I use that goes through phases, and it's fairly straightforward in some ways. And it's very exploratory, but also very, very practical in terms of figuring out, what do you believe, and is that working for you? What do
Mm.
you believe about yourself? What do you believe about the world? How are these ideas interfering or showing up in your lives in invisible ways that you don't even realize? And is that okay? And we go through phases of our life, and our lives change, but sometimes our beliefs don't. So there's a mismatch between, what our life, the current version of our life and what we've always thought. What we thought was true, what we thought was true about ourselves or about the world, and then it changes. And sometimes there's just a little bit of a mismatch between this version of our life and our programming, and we need to update those ideas so
Mm.
that they are useful to us in this current version of the life that we're living. And that could be because things have changed for the better, things have changed not so much for the better. We've changed in ways that are confusing to us. It's really identifying an answer to the question like, who are you? Who are you? Why are you here? And how do you want to be in the
Yeah.
world? Who and how do you want to be in the world? And let's just do that. Let's do that. Figure it out, and then let's do it.
Great. So that's something I guess again anyone could check in, work
Yeah.
work these things out.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the model that I use is kind of it's not specific in some ways. Because everybody, no matter who you are and what you're dealing with, um, has ideas about how it should be, or how they could be, or how it used to be, and how they would prefer it to be. And we can work with that. We can close the gap between how it is and how you would rather it be, and how you would prefer it to be, or sometimes believe it should be.
Mm.
The wider the gap between those two realities, the more distress we feel. And distress could be anything. It could be anger, stress, depression, anxiety, boredom. Fill in the gap with whatever type of distress, whichever flavor you prefer. And the work that I do with folks is to basically close that gap. We
Mm.
do that one of two ways. One is we either change the current version of your life so it looks more like this ideal version,
Mm.
or we change this ideal version so that it looks a lot more like the current version of the reality
Yeah.
of your life is today. So it's acceptance and change.
Okay. So then the mismatch can then
Yeah.
align.
Yeah. Well, there's always a little bit of a gap. So
Yeah.
there's a little tiny gap, and
Like,
that's fine because I think that's where growth happens. That's where like we
yeah.
strive to have things be different, right? But if it's completely closed, hey, good. Like that's great. You got it figured out.
Feel that. And so, out of interest, with this sort of, I mean, you've obviously been through a lot in all the things you've been doing, your career and starting your business, etc. Um, Would you recommend, have you found sort of coaching, mentoring, that sort of thing helpful? Would you recommend people to sort of help making that leap that you did? That would be something to look into.
Mentoring or coaching or finding some, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, I have along the way had mentor type like relationships, and I've always found them to be very, very helpful. Unfortunately, everybody's busy, so it really takes like like an intentional and concerted effort to make those types of relationships work. But when they work so well. Um, and yeah, I think finding somebody who has, at least from the outside, looks like they've got it figured out. You're like, I want to do what they do. I want to have what they have. I like their whole vibe. Like, I want to talk to them. I want to figure out how they did it. Um, and I think it's also helpful from a coaching perspective to have somebody reflect your ideas off of it at the very least. Like, here's what I'm thinking. How does that sound to you? We can get inside our own head, and here I am by myself most of the time. I'm inside my head a lot. It's always really helpful to like push those thoughts out
Mm.
and get feedback.
Yeah.
Get feedback. And sometimes we're reluctant to get feedback because sometimes we don't want to hear it. But I think it's more helpful to have that feedback, to solicit that feedback. I'm always asking my clients, like, how's it going? Is this what you're
Mhm.
looking for? Are you getting what I, are you getting out of this what you hoped? And tell me, because if you don't tell me, I can't change anything. But to also have somebody hold you accountable. So it's not just sort of like, let's brainstorm together how this could look, but then, okay, so what are you going to do? Great. Let's check in about it. Let's see how it's going. I think that's been one of the most helpful things for me is finding someone that holds me to account, holds me to deadlines, holds me to obligations. Um, like some of that I can do myself, but there's a bunch of other things that if I didn't have somebody else, that was kind of, hey, that thing you said you were going to do, have you done it? Um, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Fabulous. Gosh, I don't know where time has gone, but I do have just a few more questions if you've got the time.
Sure.
First one is, um, do you have, I mean, from everything we've spoken about, I mean, you've offered us loads of insights and tools, but do you have any other advice that you'd like to share with our audience, who perhaps are, thinking of starting their
Mm.
business or making a change in general, perhaps?
No, it's a really good question. I have been very interested for a while now on identity and affirming our identity, but also having a pretty good understanding, a well-informed understanding of like who we are. And it changes. Like it's not it's not like a static thing. It's a dynamic thing. But I think when it comes to change, there's almost a new identity that we adopt in that process, which is seeing yourself as the type of person who does a certain thing, acts a certain way, has a certain characteristic. It's almost like you have to envision it and step into a role, like embody this idea about yourself, which informs your life.
Mm,
I've been working a lot with folks on doing affirmations, which is really just sort of laying out kind of an inventory of like who you are.
mm,
And when you do that, it reveals a lot about what you believe is important about who you are, the
mm,
things that you value. And it doesn't have to be a list of all strengths. We have some strengths, we have some liabilities, we have things about us that like, yeah, this is true about me. I don't love it, but it's true. Maybe one of the things that maybe we're working on, but claiming those things reveals a lot about what's important to us or what we value. And even when we don't have those characteristics, it still is information about what's important because we
mm,
wouldn't be listing it if it wasn't important to us. Anyway, so when we're making change, especially hard change, it's almost like you have to not just do the things that are different, but be different and behaving our way into new ideas about ourselves instead of having the new ideas necessarily come first. It's sort of like a sort of very bi-directional. So we decide who we want to be or how we want to be in the world, and we behave our way into that. So, and then, yeah. So I think, and so I guess what I mean by all of this is like our behavior is really important. What we do is really important. It sends a really important message back to us and other people, but mostly us,
Mm.
about what's important to us and who we are.
Mm.
So I talk about self-care a lot, and this idea of taking care of ourselves, and through a lens of the opposite of self-care is self-neglect. So when we don't practice self-care in whatever form, there's all sorts of ways that we can do self-care. When we take the time to take care of ourselves too, it sends an important message back to us that we are worth
Yeah.
the time, effort, and energy that it takes to do that. But sometimes it does. Like, it takes a little extra effort to like put a nice meal together and nourish our bodies in that way. When we don't consistently, the message that we send is that we're not worth it. That our health, our well-being, our lives are not worth the time, effort, or energy that it might take to do those things. So our behavior provides a feedback, a
Yeah.
mechanism for us that I think we need to check ourselves against on a regular basis to make sure that what we're doing lines up with who we are or who we're trying to.
Oh, I really love that. And I think that's really helpful for those people, including myself, who might neglect that self-care. It's framing
Yeah.
it in a way where you're like, but actually there's more to it than just neglecting yourself. You're neglecting your worth, and therefore that's going to impact who you are in the world and who you want to be and how you want to get there. It's great.
It's layered. Like, it's so deep.
It's so good.
But yeah, that
Yeah.
that that is that's my take home.
Oh, I love it. I'm so glad I asked that question. I do have one more, which is our She Heals the World question, because I'd love to know, what does healing the world mean to you?
Oh gosh. Okay, put me on the spot. Healing the world. Oh gosh. Okay, so I'm going to link it. I'm bringing it right back to self-care. I think actually self-care
Mm.
could heal the world. And I know that's like, wait, what? I don't know if people, I don't know, maybe other people have said that. Maybe I'm not saying anything all that profound, but I've thought about this. I think when we take better care of ourselves, we take care of the things that we love, right?
Yeah.
So self-love is the feeling that we have. Self-care are the things that we do, and self-compassion is what we think. We think in compassionate ways about ourselves. We love. So anyway, self-care is, I look at it in terms of the actions that we take. We take care of things that we care about. I think when we take better care of ourselves, it like
Mm.
it um, has a ripple effect.
Yeah.
I think we're more likely, because when we take care of ourselves, we feel good about ourselves. We feel good about taking care of, doing that ourselves. And I think we also end up then taking better care of our loved ones. We take better care of homes. We take better care of our planet. And I think self-neglect has the opposite effect.
Yeah.
So I think self-care is also not, it's synonymous with community. It doesn't have to be, I think self-care and other care go hand in hand.
Mm.
And I think staying connected to ourselves is important. We don't want to be disconnected from ourselves. When we're disconnected from ourselves, we cannot be connected to other people. We can't be connected to community. We can't be connected to causes that are important. We just become more increasingly isolated and alone. So like it all goes together. It all goes together. So I think healing the world, and maybe this is again, not that profound,
Yeah.
starts with healing ourselves,
I'm, do you know,
right?
it's so profound, and I love, you know, the layers of psychology you can put into it as well, because it's it makes sense from all perspectives. So
Yeah,
yeah,
this healing ecosystem, like
yeah,
it's all connected. Yeah. So yeah,
I love
that's
it.
that's my take.
Thank you so much, Dr. Natalie. This has been such a fabulous conversation. What I wanted to ask before you go is how can people find you if you want to learn more, if you want to work together perhaps, what's the best place to find you?
Wonderful. Yes, definitely reach out, get in touch for all of the reasons. I have a couple of social media pages. I'm Instagram. I'm Dr. Natalie Christine on Instagram. I also have another Instagram profile called my very mindful midlife. Very mindful midlife. Um, and let's see, I have a website. It's drnataliechristine.com. And you can find out about my practice there, which is called Priority Wellness. And you can read my blog there, and we can connect that way too.
Amazing. Your website's beautiful as well. So
Thank you. I have a wonderful person that I work with. I hope I didn't do that myself. I can't take credit. I'm still trying to figure out the behind the scenes like stuff, but yes, she's wonderful. Mindful by Jane. She's amazing.
no, it's all great. And thank you so much once again for sharing all your wisdom and advice and also your story with us. I think all of us, well, I've certainly found it very inspirational and helpful, and you've given me quite a few good nuggets to take away.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you, Izzy. I hope it's helpful, and we'll definitely stay in touch.
Yes, and thank you all so much for joining us. Stay tuned for more conversations with the She Heals the World talk show. Thank you very much, and thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Cheerio. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the She Heals the World talk show. To find out how you can grow your purpose-driven business, visit us at www.shehealstheworld.com.